But my beats, they are hard.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford here, joined by AD Drew, and we are in our week number 13 wrap-up show. AD, have you recovered from the bad beat of this weekend?
No comment, Brian.
Oh, you sound about as down and depressed as Bulldog Nation, Golden Bear Nation, Rattler Nation, anybody else's nation I'm forgetting right now?
Now, I'm gonna tell you how bad it was for me, Brian. I was I wound up going home, going back through Daytona to Jacksonville, stopping in Jacksonville on my way back home, Brian, and not paying attention. I stopped in Daytona. And stopped in the store in Daytona. Didn't really pay attention to where I was at, and I had a FAMU hat on, Brian. And the guy asked me, "How you do?" It's like, "Oh, you doing okay there, brother?" I'm like, "Yeah." Why you ask? It's like because the loss y'all took yesterday, and I thought about it like, "Oh my God, I've got this Rattler hat on." I wasn't even paying attention. That's how bad it was for me, Brian, today.
Yeah, we have, yesterday was one of those days in college football towards the end of the season where, a lot of reality sunk in. Hey, look, there was some joy and excitement for a lot of schools, and then there were some utter disappointments as seasons came to an end, and sadly some seasons ended a little bit shorter and with a little harder thud than maybe many people expected. As we prepare to get in.
And then there was one team season who officially ended today, Brian.
Okay. Today? I'm totally lost on that one.
The Bulldogs of South Carolina State, and we'll get into that a little bit later.
Oh, yeah. Well, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so, yeah, we've got plenty to talk about in this show. It's a reaction wrap-up show, lots of things to wrap up and react to. I want to remind you to check us out on Instagram and primarily on Twitter and Facebook. You can find us at MyBCSN1, the number 1. Make sure to check out our Facebook page, also our BCSN Sports Wrap Facebook page, as well as go to www.mybcsn.net. And that's where we have our webpage, our top 5 polls, different articles, and things of that nature. So, AD Drew and Brian Fulford here. We're coming back. We were live in Orlando, Florida, for the Florida Classic. And I don't know. We can start in a number of places, AD. We can start with that game, or I would say let's start with the top games, I think, of the weekend, which deservedly so were the Division II playoff games. How about that?
Okay, we'll start with those losses, Brian.
Exactly, yeah. We will start, sadly, with those losses. I think, and we had a great time. I thought it was a great show with Chris Ferguson. If you hopefully had a chance to listen to our Week 13 previews, and we sort of got into all of the talk about the Bowie State, the CIAA season, Miles and what they're, just Division II football. We really went in depth in that show, and I don't think I didn't see a scenario in which Bowie State would lose, but they did. They ended up losing 17-9 to Carson Newman. And Bowie State was hosting. They, of course, were unbeaten, 11-0 going into that ball game, ranked as high as number 11 in the Division II polls, number 1 in our BCSN under D1 poll. And, when you go and if you didn't get a chance to watch this game, but you just had the opportunity to follow it via maybe you went back and looked at the box scores and try to figure out, well, how did Bowie State lose this game? I mean, they lost a game in which they outgained Carson Newman 410 to 363. They ran 13 more plays than Carson Newman, 69 to 56. They had 10 more first downs, 21 to 11. They committed 5 fewer penalties, 5 to 10. And they even led after the first quarter, 9 to 7. But when you get into the red zone 5 times and you come away with a big fat 0, and you combine that with the other team really just coming up with really 2 big plays, one of them that led to a touchdown, one of them which led to was a direct touchdown in the beginning of the game for a 63-yard touchdown pass, and then another one that led to another pass play on a screen that was 62 yards that led to another touchdown. That's all it took, is not capitalizing on opportunities, and the other team just doing enough to win. Did I summarize that game about as well as I could, AD? What did you see, or what's your thoughts?
From what I was able to see at the game, Bryan, you were absolutely right. I mean, the Bowie defense played as well as it could have. For the first time this season, the Bowie offense did not come through, and Jerome Johnson with those 2 interceptions, one of them untimely interception towards the end of the game. It was just not a good situation. So now we're looking at all of our HBCUs in Division II are done.
Yeah, and looking at this game, this particular game, this Bowie Carson Newman game, the number of drives, I thought it was interesting looking at the pacing of this game. And when I say the pacing, I went and looked at the total number of drives. You had Carson Newman had 12 offensive drives in this ball game. Bowie had 10. In the first quarter, Carson had 5 drives. They started with the ball first. They had 5 drives. Bowie had 4. So essentially what you had in the second, third, and fourth was really each team just about having 2 possessions per quarter. I think there's an extra possession in the second quarter, I think, that Carson Newman had. But I want you to listen to these drives that Bowie had. And this is, as a game goes on and you feel the angst and anxiety kick in, you look back on these drives and you just kick yourself. I'm sure Coach Wilson and his staff will be kicking themselves as they reevaluate and evaluate these plays. But these drives, going from the second quarter on, in the second quarter, a 7-play, 27-yard drive ended with an interception at the Bowie 40. In the second quarter, a 9-play, 49-yard drive ended with a missed 34-yard field goal. They got all the way down to the Carson Newman 16. Missed field goal. Going into the third quarter, Bowie started with the ball for the start of the second half. They went 3 and out, punt. Next possession in the third quarter, 7 plays, 48 yards. They have a blocked 44-yard field goal. They got all the way down to the Carson Newman 27. Okay, third quarter now. And then we're going into the fourth quarter now. And these are the 2 possessions that that really, and at this point you're down going into the fourth quarter. You're down. It's a close ball game. It's a 10-9 ball game here at this point going into the fourth quarter. Carson Newman scores with 13:28, so they take a 17-9 lead in the fourth quarter. And these last two drives by Bowie, they went on a 12-play, 68-yard drive, got all the way down to the Carson Newman 13. They went fourth and out. Did not, obviously because they were down by 8, they chose to go for it on fourth down. Didn't come up with a first down. Didn't come up with a touchdown. Turned the ball over. Then one of the last drives that they would have of the season, 9 plays, 57 yards, got all the way down to the Carson Newman 5. And as you just stated, Jerome Johnson throws the interception in the end zone, and that pretty much ended the ball game. And so Carson Newman advances. Bowie State's season is over. I can't say we saw this, although this is a team who rose to the challenge in the previous 2 times that they were down, right? AD, what was that? Winston-Salem State and Shaw. They actually, in the first game of the year against American International, I think, they were down. And so they rose to the occasion, and they hadn't been down in the last 3 to 4 weeks at all. I mean, they had been, boat racing people. And it just caught up with them.
Yeah, I think, especially those last 2 games after they played the 2 Virginia schools, State and Union, with those easy games that they had against Elizabeth City and Lincoln, and the easy game against Shawan. The ease in which they beat Virginia Union, who was supposed to be a good team, and they pretty much, the Virginia State game, they dominated. Bowie had not really been tested since I believe that would have been the 4th or the 5th week when they played Shaw, Bryan. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I would say they played Virginia State. They played Virginia State maybe a week or 2 before Union.
No, well, they played State actually the week before Union, but
okay.
They really controlled the game against State.
That was a 10-point. I guess 10-point ball game. I guess that's what I was thinking.
It was a close game, but you can have a close game, but the other team is controlling the game. Same thing with Fayetteville. Fayetteville was a close game, but you had the feeling that Bowie was in control of the game. This was the first time, probably since the Winston-Salem State game in week 3, I believe that was, Bryan, where you felt like Bowie State was not in control of the game, and that Paddock probably came on. Jerome Johnson trying to make plays. Hey, he's made plays all year. The same chances that he took in other games, he took in this game. He just took those against a team that may have been better prepared or had a better defense, and those same opportunities that were there against the CIAA competition were not there against that SAC team. And let's not sell this team short, Bryan. This team has only lost to the 2 teams in the SAC who are ahead of them. One of those teams is undefeated, and the other team that they lost to only lost to the team that's undefeated, and that being Lenore Ryan and Wingate.
Yeah.
So this Carson Newman team had been tested. Bowie,
they were
outside of Winston-Salem State, really had not been tested this year, Bryan.
I wonder, AD, in the way the rearranged playoff settings helped Miles, do you think if they had been in the traditional format from last year, do you feel like Bowie would have played a lesser opponent in the first round? Because it seems like Carson Newman
probably bet West Florida in the first round, and that West Florida is no pushover, Bryan.
Did they beat Wingate?
No, no, they didn't. But still, that's still not. There's still no pushover.
Well, right, but I'm just saying the point that the SAC had 3 very strong teams, and the fact that Carson Newman came in with the kind of record they had, and look, Carson Newman hadn't, if I'm not mistaken, they hadn't been to the playoffs in since 2015. So even though it's a program with a lot of tradition, they hadn't been to the playoffs in 3 or 4 years.
Right. And you're talking about a West Florida team that's only 2 years removed from the championship game prior. So you still have players on that West Florida team that have a championship pedigree.
Yeah, look, I'm just reading some of the quotes here from the Bowie. They recognize what a missed opportunity it was. You see, I'm reading a quote here from Coach Wilson. He says, quote, "If you look at the stat sheet, I wouldn't say they shut us down. We didn't execute in the red zone and played a sloppy game. We lost the game to a very good football team." And then another quote by linebacker Tamar Phillips. "The way I look at it, we gave up 2 long plays to them, and the rest of the game we held them pretty well." Well, that's true. I mean, and they held you guys pretty well, And so it's always interesting when you hear. It's one of those things about saying, I guess some people will. I will always look at the phrase, "Did you get beat or did you lose?" And this is a game where I feel like Bowie State lost. They didn't really get beat because of what they outgained this team. They really outplayed this team. They just lost because they didn't execute in the right opportunity. I mean, let's be real. 5 opportunities in the red zone. If you come away with 3 field goals out of those 5, you win a 1-point ball game.
Correct.
Yeah, you win by 1.
Check that, Brian. West Florida did beat Wingate. So you have 2 Gulf South teams playing each other, 2 SAC teams playing each other. And
again, the top 2 rated team, and it just so happens the top 2 rated teams in the region are there, and that's why. So, all credit to the CIAA and Bowie State for what they did, but so let's wrap the discussion on Bowie. And we know this as alums of Florida A&M. What's the feeling? What do you think the feeling is from Bowie State fans? I haven't really read too many comments or been to any boards to really kind of know what the vibe is from Bowie State fans or alums. Of course, they recognize it's a great season. They, are very, very pleased and proud of what Coach Wilson and the team did. But what do you think? What would you be feeling if you were a Bowie State fan? And I don't know if that's fair to ask you, given your. I don't know if that's a fair question to ask you, given where you're at right now. But
if I'm a Bowie State fan, I'm very optimistic. Let's be real, Brian. They exceeded expectations. Losing an All-American such as Amir Hall, coming into the season, your starting quarterback goes down in game 2 due to injury. You have this transfer that comes in that you know nothing about, who winds up being Player of the Year in the conference, and he has another year of eligibility. I have optimism. This team was not supposed to be this good. We know they were going to be good, but this good, Brian? No one expected that, especially with the questions that they had at the quarterback position. And the defense turned out to be better than most people thought they were going to be. You had a good defense.
Well, did they though? I mean, AD, think about it for a second. I hear what you're saying, but think about this. They were the preseason number 1 in everybody's D2 HBCU polls. they were the preseason number one team in most of the polls that I saw.
You know, a lot of people had Union projected to win that CIAA. If it wasn't Bowie State, Union was the team that they had to make that next step. And
right. Okay, maybe so, but I'm just saying in terms when I saw the preseason polls, if I recall correctly, the D2 it was Bowie State that they were the number one team, right. But so yeah, I agree with you on the exceeding expectation. I think they definitely exceeded expectation given everything that from last season. I mean, nobody expected or knew. You know, we thought they had a good quarterback, but we thought it was another guy. You know,
yeah,
and not the guy it turned out to be. Yeah. So we'll talk. I'm sure we'll talk more about Bowie and what this means to the bigger discussion on the Black College National Championship thing. But we've got to make mention of Miles College taking on Lenore-Rhyne. We knew it would be a challenge. The Versus Sports Simulator told us it would be a big score, and the Versus Simulator was right. Hell, the Versus Simulator even had the other game correct. But the margin was much wider, and they got the margin right, pretty much. I mean, Lenore-Rhyne beats Miles 36-7. Lenore-Rhyne jumped out to a 26-0 lead by the end of the half. I mean, they scored, I think, 14 in the first quarter, 12 in the second quarter. That was all before Miles even scored their first points with 9:36 in the third quarter off of a touchdown run by Dante Edwards. In the ball game, Lenore-Rhyne rushed for 323 yards. They scored on a block punt and a safety. That block punt was in the first quarter, I believe, that put them up 14-0. Miles was only able to gain 125 yards of total offense. 33 of those came in the passing game. Just by comparison, Lenore-Rhyne's running back, Amin Stevens, a sophomore, ran 18 times for 128 yards and a touchdown. So, Lenore-Rhyne had one guy who outgained Miles the entire game. And I mentioned in my in the preview, I thought Daniel Smith would have to be the guy to have a good game. He did not have a good game. He was 1 of 7 passing for 4 yards, but the backup quarterback did not have a better game either. He was 4 of 12. I read a quote from Coach Ruffin. He sounded bewildered at why the passing game was unable to work or be successful at all. It was rainy and wet, but, I mean, it wasn't like it didn't rain sheets. It wasn't a downpour, you know what I'm saying? I don't think we were watching the game online. It didn't look tremendously bad. I mentioned Dante Edwards. He had 15 carries, 80 yards, and a touchdown. Jay Fitch, the punter. This is the kind of, when you have these kind of days, this tells you what kind of game you had. Jay Fitch, 11 punts for an average of 31.5. His long was 55. He had 11 punts. And we've seen a punter kick 11 punts, and that game was not pretty.
Chris Fadul.
Yeah. The crazy part about this game, Miles' defense, they got 2 interceptions. They got 2 fumble recoveries. Really, Miles' offense, they weren't productive. They didn't make a lot of mistakes. I mean, other than the punt and the safety, they didn't make any other mistakes. I mean, there were no interceptions by either quarterback. There were no fumbles. This was just Lenore-Rhyne with, and I think we noted this. I'm looking back in my notes here. Yeah, Lenore-Rhyne, the number 6 rushing defense the number 6 rushing defense in the country, the number 8 rushing, number 23 in total defense. I mean, but their rush defense was number 6. They just pretty much stopped Miles from doing whatever they wanted. And, Miles, I mean, in terms of time of possession, AD, 36-40 to 23-20. That's it. How do you wrap up? How do you summarize what happened to Miles?
Bryan, you said coming into this game, Daniel Smith was going to have to be the Daniel Smith of last year in order for Miles to have a chance in this game. Well, Bryan, once again, you got it right, because Daniel Smith was not the Daniel Smith of last year, completing only one pass for 4 yards in this game, forcing Miles to go to the backup quarterback, LeJean Cordair. So Ruff is going to have to go out and find a quarterback. We know he can run the ball. We know he loves to run the ball. Ruffin is going to have to find somebody who can give them another option so that they can throw the ball. It's almost like almost like Tua and Jalen Hurts. When Jalen Hurts wasn't doing what he's supposed to do, you had a Tua. You're going to have to find some way to change the pace up when your running game is off, Bryan, and be able to throw the ball out there to somebody.
I would love to be able to hear from Coach, off the record or later in the spring or, in the winter or whatever, what happened to the passing game. I'm just – or I should say Daniel Smith. I mean, it just seemed like Daniel Smith did not have the kind of season that he had the year before. I mean, I'm just kind of curious. That's all. It was, and I don't know if it was a product of the fact that you had 2 other running backs or 3 other running backs, and it was a more diverse squad. But maybe I don't know. It's bewildering. But regardless, it was a great season for Miles. They repeated as SIAC champs, finished the season with a 9-3 record. They, I think I sent out a tweet, and I think you agreed with me here. Miles pretty much is the SIAC, or should be considered the SIAC team of the decade, given the fact that they won 4 SIAC championships in 2011, 2015, 2018, and 2019. And went to the playoffs. There was another final in there that they lost, but okay. So 4 to 5 SIAC finals that they went to. We know at least they won 4 more than any other team. And it was a great season, a great decade for Miles. And the future, it'll be interesting to see what the future holds for Miles and the SIAC, because there are big changes happening in the SIAC, of course, with the addition of Savannah State, the future addition of Edward Waters. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but Miles is definitely become, I hate to say it, I don't know, can I say it, AD? Have they kind of replaced Tuskegee as the power of the West?
You can say it. I'll refuse to say it.
All right, yeah. So I will say it. They have replaced, or they have temporarily, because these kind of things are all cyclical, and I'm sure one day Tuskegee will come back to their rightful place. But for now, Miles has sort of replaced Tuskegee, and that's everybody's got to chase somebody.
What the West needs to watch out for are the thoroughbreds from Kentucky State coming out of nowhere this particular year to wind up with 7 wins, including 2 wins over FCS teams, Bryan. So, Miles may be on top right now. Tuskegee is Tuskegee, but the one team outside of Tuskegee and Kentucky State that won the West during the decade of the teens, Bryan. Excuse me, outside of Miles and Tuskegee, who won the West during that decade, was Kentucky State, Bryan.
Yeah. Hey, look, I mean that's the team that the recruiting will be very interesting and the off season for this team because, Coach Jackson really took what was already there and molded it, gave it some inspiration, put some love and TLC into it, and look what he built, look what he turned it into.
Right. And
now imagine as the next group comes in.
Right, and Kentucky State usually has a good recruiting base, and obviously in Louisville, in state, in the Cincinnati area, but they also get a lot of recruits from Chicago and St. Louis. So they have a pretty large recruiting base, and probably get a few of them from your hometown in Indianapolis there, Brian. So they have a broad. Yeah, they have a broad base to go out and get some athletes who are within a 4-hour drive of Frankfort, Kentucky.
Oh yeah, but I mean between the Tennessee, Southern Ohio, Southern Indiana, up to Chicago. Yeah, I mean they can really. There's a big base there for them to go after.
And even reaching into the Detroit area, Brian.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, exactly. I was trying to think who else in the SIC is really up that way other than Central State.
Central State.
Yeah, I mean, but that's really about it. I mean, everybody else from the SIC is really competing after players in the South. I mean, unless somebody has some contacts and is reaching out, so it'll be interesting to see how the future holds. So that's a good point, AD. Very good point. Let's anything else regarding? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, the one thing, you talked about whether Bowie State exceeded expectations or whatever. Miles is who we thought Miles was. They came in as the team predicted to win the West. They won the West. They had a blemish or two on their record, but Miles is what we thought Miles was going to do. We always do exactly. Come down to Miles at Tuskegee in the last game, which it did. This year, it was clear Miles had the better team, but that's the rival game, so you throw all that stuff out the window. And most people had Miles winning the SIAC championship over the East, which they did. And honestly, Miles probably went out right when a lot of the pundits thought they would go out in the first round if they got in.
Yep. Well said. I agree 100%. All right, let's do this. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some conversation regarding what's happening over in the MEAC and the SWAC as the regular season came to a close, a bitter close for some of us. And then we'll kind of end the show with a few other notes and a little other discussion here. So hang in there with us. We'll be back right after this. You are listening to and watching the BCSN Sports Wrap on the Black College Sports Network.
Q Time is our classic Atlanta soul food restaurant located in the historic West End. Q Time Soul Food is a family business started by Fred and Christine Crenshaw. Come on in, relax, and sink your chops into our tantalizing, mouth-watering, distinctive soul food with a twist, the Q Time way. 1120 Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard, or call your order in at 404-758-2881. Do you miss your mama's cooking? Then come on down to Q Time, an Urban Passport member.
The real reason why I went after Comcast and Charter, it didn't have anything to do with my cable networks. It didn't. What happened was a gentleman wanted to do the Black College Sports Network in partnership with the HBCUs. And Comcast did not accept it. And that would have made a lot of money for these black colleges. Absolutely. And it would have educated the Black College Sports Network. This is what he wanted to do. That would have educated a lot of black kids. And when they didn't do that, That's when I came off the bench and said, okay, I'm going to light you up like a Christmas tree. Okay? That was the real reason why I got into it, was when I saw what happened with the Black College Sports Network, which I don't know. I just knew that these black, I knew that these black colleges were going to benefit, and these black kids were going to get the education that they deserved and not have to pay.
The Creole seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down. It's like a loop machine.
This December 21st, the best in HBCU football will collide in Atlanta at the Celebration Bowl. MEAC versus SWAC. Champion versus champion. Only one team will rise above the rest and claim the coveted Celebration Bowl trophy. Come join the celebration at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this December. For more information, visit thecelebrationbowl.com.
Welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford and AD Drew here. Want to remind you to take a stroll over to our Twitter pages if you would, and give us a follow. You can follow AD at BCSN Drew, DREW, and you can find me at DRB365. Of course, our Black College Sports Network Twitter feed is at MyBCSN1, the number 1. All right, AD, so we move over to the FCS, and we move over to, we're going to start with the number 1. You know, we started the last segment with the number 1 team in the under D1 poll. We're going to start with the number 1 team in our D1 poll, and that would be Florida A&M playing in the Florida Classic. We went to that. We were sitting there in press box. I can only summarize this game with the words deja vu. And I say that because I want to just travel down memory lane. I'm not going to go as far back as coming into this ball game, the 8 previous times that Bethune-Cookman had beat Florida A&M. I'm just going to go back to 2017. 2017, going into the ball game, Florida A&M with a record of 3-7, Bethune-Cookman with a record of 6-4, and at that time the losing streak, I believe, was at 6, and Florida A&M goes into the fourth quarter with a 24, or at one point, Florida A&M had a 24-10 lead real early into the fourth quarter. Okay, so that is, 14-point lead going into the fourth quarter. Bethune-Cookman ends up scoring three touchdowns on 3 consecutive drives and caps the game off with an interception of quarterback Ryan Stanley with 36 seconds left, as FAMU was driving, looking to potentially get the go-ahead score. Final score, Bethune-Cookman 29, Florida A&M 24. Going into 2018, last year, okay, I believe at this point, I'm going to try to do the quick math here. I believe we had a 19-19 tie going into the fourth quarter. And Florida A&M had a record at this time of 6-4. Bethune-Cookman at 6-5. All Florida A&M had to do was win this ball game, and they had lost 2 games coming into it. All they had to do was win, and they would have won the MEAC championship and gone to the Celebration Bowl. Well, Florida A&M would actually give up 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns, as actually they would give up 2 fourth-quarter interceptions, including what would turn out to be a pick six that would yield the final score and push the 33-19. I believe that came with 17 seconds left. I don't know if you sense a theme here, AD. And that is
no
how.
Comment.
And that is how win number 8 for Bethune-Cookman, loss number 8 for Florida A&M happened. Man, I remember that like it was yesterday. 33-19. So entering this ball game, obviously FAMU a 5-point favorite, winners of 9 games in a row. Essentially, they had clinched, if without all the self-imposed sanctions, FAMU had clinched the MEAC championship last week by beating Howard, because the other teams in the MEAC, including South Carolina State and North Carolina A&T, all had 2 losses. FAMU had none coming into this ball game. So regardless of what happens, technically FAMU should be and will be considered by many the MEAC champions. Maybe when I say many, probably many people in the state of Florida. Now, I don't know about, I can't speak for the rest of the country, but so coming into this ball game, that's what Florida A&M needed. And this game went every ways, kind of sideways. And, I mean, it started with a Ryan Stanley pick six that gave Bethune-Cookman their first lead. However, Stanley did come back. He answered, gave the Rattlers a score to tie the ball game up. But then Bethune-Cookman put up 2 quick scores in the – I shouldn't call them too quick, but they just scored twice in the second quarter to go up by as much as 21-7. FAMU did answer just be after Bethune's second touchdown of that quarter. FAMU did answer with a score to cut it to 21-13. However, they missed the PAT. And I believe somewhere in that second quarter as well, FAMU missed a field goal, didn't they, AD?
I do believe so. No, they missed the PAT. It was just the PAT. They didn't miss a field goal.
Okay, I thought there was a block. There was a block somewhere. There was a block or a missed field goal attempt, I thought, that led to a Bethune touchdown. I can't recall where that happened.
May have been a block punt.
No. It wasn't a block punt. It was a field goal. I'm pretty sure it was a field goal. Anyway, we'll go back into the stats, and you can go back and look at it, folks. It's there. But anyway, that a special teams error, mistake, missed field goal, missed punt, whatever, led to a Bethune touchdown. So at the half, it's 21-13. Hopefully, you got a chance to see our pregame show, our halftime show rather. The rushing was the big thing. At that point in the game, Akevius Williams had already scored 2 touchdowns, but it was the rushing. FAMU, for some reason, had already given up a great deal of, almost 100. They were outgained by almost 100-something yards of rushing yardage in the first half, and it didn't get better in the second half because in total, Bethune, and I'm just kind of seeing how quickly I can pull up the team stats here. They outrushed FAMU 198-111. It was a much larger margin, I thought. In total, they outgained FAMU 467-353. I can't think of too many times this year that FAMU's defense gave up 467 yards of offense. Can you, AD?
No, Brian. No, I cannot.
And Bethune-Cookman committed. Now, you talk about, besides the fact that you're giving up leading yards, Bethune committed 13 penalties, 138 yards. FAMU only committed 4 penalties. And Bethune's penalties were like in the worst opportune times when he gave up those penalties. So
and that's like the only stat that Bethune had worse numbers than FAMU in was the penalty stat, Brian.
Exactly. That was it. I mean, they pretty much owned this game. I mean, Bethune had more first downs, 24-16. Passing yards, Akevius Williams had a better passing day than Ryan Stanley, 269 to 242 in terms of yards. Akevius Williams also had a rushing touchdown. Time of possession, Bethune 34-03, FAMU 25-57. Already 3 turnovers. FAMU 2 interceptions, 1 fumble loss, 3-1 was a turn. You're not supposed, but still, all that said, AD, with and it's funny, at under the 5-minute mark, FAMU scored with about 11 minutes in the fourth quarter to take a 27-24 lead. They had the lead as Bethune was driving under 5 minutes to go. At that point in the ball game, the most surreal thing happened for us. And I'll let you describe what happened for, as at this point of the story, AD, as what we experienced as Bethune was driving. We hit the 5-minute mark, and we start to head towards the elevator to head down to the field.
All right, so we decided to get on the elevator. We're watching plays as we're walking towards the elevator. We're watching the monitors in the press and the suite area. So finally, the elevator comes, and Brian, we should let those other people catch that elevator, and we should have stayed on the floor and caught the next one because we would have saw the play, but we did not see the play because we were in the elevator. When we get into the elevator, it's, I believe, was it 3rd and 25, Brian, or 3rd and 22?
Yes, there had just been a in the grass call that set up now, and there was a 15-yard in the grass call. I think it was 3rd and
it was 3rd and 20.
3rd and 25.
Okay, and because there was some going back and forth, they were reviewing the play. There was a replay review to verify some things during this play. So as we're coming down, we get to floor number 2. We hear a big roar. So, of course, everybody in the elevator is wondering what's going on as the people get off on floor number 2. And then when we get to floor number 1, we find out that Bethune has scored a touchdown.
As soon as we stepped off the elevator, the young lady who was pushing the buttons, Bethune Cookman just scored. They just scored. It's like, what?
Yes.
we were just like, what?
Right. And Brian, the key play that I think, going back and looking at this, set this up, was the safety who was ejected for FAMU for targeting. Because if he's in the game, Bell, he's probably in the position to make the play on the 3rd down, where Bethune doesn't get that opportunity. But because FAM has the backup in there in an already depleted secondary, the opportunity was there. And let's be real, if you're Akevius Williams, you're going to pick on the guy who just got in the game less than 2 minutes ago, who really hasn't had opportunity to break a good sweat and to understand the speed and the flow of this particular game.
Yeah, it would turn out to be Isaac Washington, who had already had a big game, capped off the 9-play, 69-yard drive with a 15-yard touchdown run with 2:14 remaining.
But the game was not over.
No. Definitely it was not over. It was not over. I struggle to even find the words to even pull this last part out.
And give credit to the Bethune, and they mentioned this in the press conference after the game. The Bethune defensive line caused the interception. The play before the interception that won the game for Bethune, the ball should have and could have been picked off, but they got more pressure on Ryan Stanley, forced him to scramble, and Ryan Stanley, trying to make the big play, threw the ball right to the Bethune defender.
Well, yeah, the defender did a great job of jumping up and watching it live, because at that point I'm in the end zone and we've got video of it. He jumped up to sort of just kind of smack the ball. He really smacked it like almost like a block for a volleyball spike. And he realized that as he clapped his hands together, that, oh, smack. I stopped the ball, and literally that's it. He basically ends up snagging the ball out of the air for the interception. And, you know.
And one other thing, Brian, his first career interception, his first interception since high school.
Wow. Well, that's wicked. That's a great play by Devin James. Devin James, the linebacker, who also had a huge fumble recovery. The fumble recovery by actually Ryan Stanley had. We talked about and then this is what is so painful, for Stanley, and mentioned, all of the great accolades, and I've been saying this since the beginning of the season, all of the passing records that he broke this year would be really for naught if he wasn't able to beat Bethune. And in one respect, I hate to say this game falls, you can't ever blame one guy. Okay, let's be clear about that. I'm not blaming one guy. But when the defense did not help Florida A&M out in this game, and that's just something that Willie Simmons and the coachings will have to go back and look and say, was it just Marquise Bell? Well, Marquise Bell went out in the fourth quarter with a targeting on a big hit. So it can't just be him. It was bad all game. I mean, Bethune's passing game was just on fire all night. And so whatever was happening, it just wasn't its best. There had been better performances by the defensive unit. Even tackles that they should have had on Akevius Williams. Williams just did a great job of getting out of them. Let's give credit to him. I mean, he had a true MVP performance. But for Stanley, it ended with the 2 interceptions. The fumble was on him. It was actually, he had a nice run. He basically got the ball knocked out of his hands. It was recovered by James. And that's how it ended. I mean, he of course, he was awarded the MVP. I know I voted for him. I don't know who else. I didn't know who else to vote for, honestly. There was nobody else really on the FAMU offense, defense, or special teams that was worthy, I thought, of MVP consideration. I mean, I don't know how you voted, or if you want to share, AD. Did you have a similar thought?
I had both quarterbacks for my MVPs.
I had both quarterbacks too, and that's who ended up being the game MVPs, both quarterbacks, Akevius Williams and then Ryan Stanley. But
yeah,
I had people text me, it was like, how did Ryan Stanley win the MVP? I was like, who else were they gonna give it to?
Right, and I've got a great analogy for FAMU this year, Brian, and I think you may be able to appreciate this one, Brian. Your great quarterback of your Indianapolis Colts, Peyton Manning.
Oh gosh.
I want you to go back to his college career.
Oh yeah.
At the University of Tennessee.
Yes, sir.
Set every passing record that you could primarily think of at that point in time, but could not get Tennessee over the hump
against Florida.
Ryan Stanley. What happens the year after he goes pro? You have this guy nobody has ever heard of named T. Martin.
Mm-hmm.
What does Tennessee go on to do? They go on to win the championship.
Yeah.
Is Rashawn McKay FAMU's T. Martin?
That's a great analogy. That's a great parallel.
Because just like with Tennessee, the core group, most of the people came back after Manning left.
And let me break in for a second and say if
back.
AD is not by any means comparing Ryan Stanley to Peyton Manning. Let's be clear about that, folks. Anybody who might be listening and saying, "Oh, I know you're not comparing," no, that's not what he's doing. It's just so hopefully you didn't anyone listening didn't think that, because I know you weren't doing that.
No, I'm not saying Ryan Stanley is going to go on and start 400 games in a row in the NFL and all of that. That's not what I'm saying. But comparatively speaking, on the college level,
right? I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Similar situations.
Yeah, I mean, three losses. I mean, imagine. I mean, when you go back and think about these 3 years, the loss in 2017 ends in the final minutes of the ball game with an interception. 2018 ends on an interception, pick six. 2019 ends on an interception. I mean, you talk about having the ball in your hand on the last drive against your rival. I mean, I felt bad for the young man last year. I really did, because it was the second year in a row that happened, and then just everything about our season last year. But this year, and even having to watch him accept that MVP award surrounded by a whole team of Wildcats, and they, they were gracious. I mean, I didn't hear any little snide comments, but it was just humbling watching him accept that award. And he held a straight, solid face, had chin up, and I think I captured a photo of it. But I tell you, man, I've never been more proud of a young man and the way he has handled and dealt with, I'm sure, a lot of criticism over his time, but he's also accomplished a lot. And so I'm sure for another podcast or another show, the great discussion, and that's what makes college football fun, is the debates that you can have. And I'm sure there will be big debates about Ryan Stanley's legacy, but I would just say let it breathe for about 5 years and then come back and think about it, because trying to analyze it now won't be pretty. It deserves a few years before we talk about, and I'm talking to Rattler Nation, before you talk about where Ryan Stanley is. Just let it breathe for about 5 years before you bring it up. Let me flip it over to Bethune. Coach Terry Sims is now 5-0 in the Florida Classic. He is, how about this stat? He is 25-0 when he leads at halftime. Now, you want a stat to be thinking about going into next year. Play on Terry Sims when Bethune has a lead at half. How about that? I don't know if you can get any – I don't know if they do any in-games with FCS games, but, wow, 25-0 when leading at halftime. That's crazy.
That is of course, an amazing stat.
And, of course, the big number is 9, and that is the number of consecutive wins the Wildcats have.
And now we're gonna dedicate about 30 seconds to Bethune and the gloating that they've been doing on Twitter. And I've seen 2 great tweets that I got to give people credit for.
Go ahead.
Number one, a cat has 9 lives, and so does the Bethune Wildcats.
All right.
So hopefully they've got their 9 lives out the way. They're dying. That's number one. And then what was the other one, Brian? When I die, I want FAMU to bury me so they can let me down again.
Yeah, that one was by at Rattler Nation. I don't know who gets credit for the other one about the 9 lives, but that second one there at Rattler Nation. Who, I mean, oh man, I tell you, I mean, the funny thing about Twitter versus old school message boards, you usually had to wait until after the game before you got to the computer to get on the message boards and type out your frustrations and stuff. Nowadays, I can just jump on Twitter or Facebook, and I can just tweet out whatever raw emotions I'm feeling, and I saw it all. I even saw players were upset and distraught at fans' reaction, and I just had to be – at one point, I just had to fire out a personal tweet and just be like, look, if you're a former player that's upset that people are criticizing y'all, you know what? Cut your phone off. Get off Twitter, because that's what fans do. That's what Rattler Nation does. I'm sure every other fan base does that. They love y'all. They love you. They just are upset that they have to listen and go to work and listen to friends.
Even when you go shopping.
For the for the 9th consecutive year, almost a decade now, another senior class now. This is now I think we said this last year was the 2nd senior class that's gone 4 years. Well, now we've got the 3rd FAMU senior class that has not experienced a win against Bethune-Cookman, and that's how deep this is. And wow, so
Bryan, I'm gonna put it even further. 3,288 days.
Don't do the days. No, don't do the days on me, AD. Don't do the days.
and another 366
Congratulations,
days before there's an opportunity to do it. So
congratulations, Bethune. Give that number again. This one's for Bethune-Cookman. What's the number again, AD?
Bethune-Cookman will have bragging rights for at least 3,653 days. That's from the time they won it until the opportunity that FAM will get to take back the trophy. It'll be over 3,600 days that Bethune has run the state of Florida.
Yeah, that was the 75th meeting between A&M and Bethune-Cookman. Of course, look, this is what's crazy. FAMU still owns the series lead. Listen to the number, 49-24-1. So, I mean, this decade is an unprecedented decade that the Wildcats are in, because you take away this decade and they've got, 49-15-1 when this string started. And so, we're reaching the point where there's a group of college students who have not experienced. We've already said it enough. I'm moving on, because I got to move on for my own. I mean, jeez Louise. Congratulations to Bethune-Cookman Wildcats, winners of 9 in a row of the Florida Classic, and they finished the season 7-4, 5-3 in the conference. FAMU finishes their season 9-2, 7-1, best record in the MEAC. Period.
Yeah, one useless trivia fact about this series, Bryan. Do you know in the 50s that they actually played the Bethune FAM game at the Daytona Motor Speedway? Just a useless trivia fact.
Well, look, hey, I mean, I'm all for playing games in different locations. I mean, hey, here's what it is. There's some people seem to be upset about, the fact that we can't play in stadiums. Like, hell, Winston-Salem plays their games in the old Winston-Salem racetrack, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that's where NASCAR was born, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, so the effects of Florida A&M's loss trickles down to the rest of black college football and, of course, the MEAC. Earlier in that afternoon in Greensboro, North Carolina, the Aggie Eagle Classic took place, and really it turned into an Aggie Eagle stomping. You're not supposed to do the kind of things the Eagles that the Bulldogs did.
Bryan,
but
Just do not even refer to the Eagles in this matchup, and as you break this game down, because the Eagles never showed up.
Yeah, what's interesting?
Classic.
Last year, I believe A&T won 45-0, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. Well, anyway, 8 quarters in this, 44-0. So that now with a 54-0 win, we're talking almost 100 points to nothing in 2 years of the Aggie Classic, as you called it. And look, it was a rainy afternoon at BB&T Stadium. They didn't look like there was anyone there on the North Carolina Central side. This game, the 91-year history of this series, this is the most points that North Carolina A&T has ever scored against Central, and it's the first time that either team reached or exceeded 50 points in the series. That tells you how historic this game was. And with the win, of course, we knew all the scenarios going in. With the win, North Carolina A&T clinched the Celebration Bowl bid. They will be the MEAC representative for the 3rd consecutive year, and the 4th time in the 5-year history of the Celebration Bowl, which is somehow will probably be renamed the Aggie Celebration Bowl, or somehow they'll find a way to rename it. In that respect, of course, look, North Carolina A&T can lay claim to a share of the championship, asterisk, according to the conference. Although, and I mentioned the asterisk because let's be upfront, and many people will disagree. That's fine. But they did not have the best record in the conference. And so even though the games against Florida A&M counted on your schedule and you're not giving Florida A&M an actual share of the championship, they still need to be recognized as Florida A&M had the best record in the MEAC in 2019, period. Now, North Carolina A&T may be the conference's champion, but what's that thing in wrestling? Isn't there something called the People's Champion, AD?
Yes.
I think Florida A&M will probably be maybe outside of the state of North Carolina and maybe outside of the Carolinas, but FAMU will probably be the People's Champion given their record and what they did. Also in the mix,
they'll get it in 48 states. The 2 Carolinas will give it to their respective team.
Right, and the reason we mention the other Carolinas is because South Carolina State will also get a share of that MEAC championship, asterisk, with a 20-17 overtime win. I told you Norfolk State was going to be a team that was going to be, you had to watch out for Norfolk State. But South Carolina State ended up getting a 29-yard field goal by Dylan Bresden with 2 seconds left in the 4th quarter, and then won it on a 27-yarder in overtime as they beat Norfolk State to finish with a record of 8-3, 6-2, and a share of the conference's regular season title with North Carolina A&T. Now, that set up another scenario, AD, because South Carolina State went from not getting the Celebration Bowl, but they had an opportunity to possibly get into the FCS playoffs, didn't they?
Correct.
And so with the selection, and how many teams are in the FCS playoffs these days?
The 24 teams in the FCS playoffs, Brian, 10 automatic bids, of the 13 conferences.
13 conferences, right?
That play in that. Ivy League does not participate in the FCS playoffs, along with the MEAC and SWAC, who gave up their automatic bid in lieu of the Celebration Bowl.
And what's interesting is, even though, I was trying to look and see, I know, so it's interesting to note that there are independents. There are FCS independents. And so one of those independents, actually, I'm going to try to find a tweet here, because South Carolina State is on the outside looking in.
They were one of the first four out, especially, and those who are familiar with the NCAA basketball tournament, they actually listed that just like they do with the NCAA basketball tournament. Last four in, first four out.
Right. So AD with the great setup there, and so essentially what ended up happening as they went through the playoffs, as he said, they had a first four in and a first four out, or the first teams in, first four out. And it should be noted that looking at the teams here that made it in, you have a Furman team that made it in. Furman, I believe, ended up winning, or were they an at-large bid? You had Furman, Kennesaw State, North Dakota University, who was an independent, and then the other school, I believe, is Southern Illinois. I don't know if you're looking that up. Anyway, but South Carolina State possibly could have gotten an at-large bid, but the committee did not. And I say what's curious is, and I don't know whether anybody will debate this or will question. I mean, look, no one cares about. I'm just going to say it. Nobody cares. Those guys don't care. So they're not gonna give you the real answer. But South Carolina State not getting in, while a 7-4 independent gets in. South Carolina State beat Wofford at the beginning of the year. Wofford was a conference champion. A conference champion that got in as they weren't one of the top 8 seeds, but they're hosting a first round. I know that much. But they won their conference.
And South Carolina State's 2 losses were to 2 top 20 FCS teams also, Brian.
Top 25. Top 25, because the new poll, the Stats FCS new poll came out. So they were actually top 25. I mean, Florida A&M was 20th, is 20th, previously were 12th. North Carolina A&T is 23, previously 25th. Those were South Carolina State's 2 losses by a combined score of...
A&T was in the teens at one point in time this year, Brian. They were number 18, I believe, was their peak.
Yeah, they peaked at 18. FAMU peaked at 12. FAMU was 12 prior to this loss to Bethune. I'm curious to see what would have happened, because obviously Wofford finishes 11th in the Stats FCS poll. They were previously 14. I wonder if all the teams who were in the top 16, probably in the top 18, are all playoff teams. North Dakota is ranked 24th. The team I mentioned that got an at-large bid, 7-4. I wonder, had Florida A&M, if they didn't lose, if they would have kept FAMU at 12. You know what I'm saying? I wonder what they would have done. I wonder if they would have moved FAMU down to let some other people move up in the poll. I wonder.
But FAMU's record didn't matter because they were ineligible. But here's something that's interesting about FAMU, Brian. Do you realize that Florida A&M University has screwed North Carolina A&T 2 consecutive years out of a playoff bid? Last year, FAMU had 3 games to win 1 to go to the Celebration Bowl. FAMU record was not good enough to get an at-large bid. A&T would have gotten an at-large bid had FAMU won the conference last year. Correct? Now, let's take this year. If FAMU does not self-impose, FAMU wins the conference again this year. Who's good enough to get an at-large bid at the BCSN? None other than the North Carolina A&T Aggies. So for 2 consecutive years, FAMU has cost A&T a playoff bid because A&T is obligated to go to the Celebration Bowl as the BCSN representative. What says FAMU could not go as a conference champion because of the self-imposed penalty.
Wow, that's an amazing look at all of it right there, AD. That right there, that's next level. That's wow. Yeah, I can't really add any much to that. That's just that's nice. You gotta appreciate what FAMU has indirectly done to what they've indirectly done to A&T, right, and the MEAC, right? It makes you, and yeah, A&T probably would have got into the playoffs in those 2 scenarios had FAMU been eligible and gone on to the Celebration Bowl these last 2 years. Before we go to the last sort of the last couple conversations that we mentioned. I want to jump over to the SWAC quickly, and the only 3 games were played on Saturday. You had Alabama A&M with a 30-13 win over Mississippi Valley State, Arkansas Pine Bluff with a 45-13 win over Texas Southern, and then Alcorn State with a 41-6 win over Jackson State. With that win, I mean, obviously we already spotlighted that Alcorn State had won the SWAC East, but they needed to win to secure the home field for the SWAC championship game. They did that in tremendous fashion. They got that win.
Gas the bus up to Lorman, Mississippi.
Yeah. So that's where they'll be. That's where they'll be heading. I wanted to, while I was mentioning that, I wanted to make mention of just a couple of numbers for Alabama A&M. You know, Alabama A&M will finish the year 7-5, right? And the crazy part about their season is they are probably 2 or 3 plays away from maybe being in the discussion as one of the best teams in black college football. I mean, statistically, offensively, what they have done this year has been outstanding. I mean, they've got, of course, they've got Akil Glass, who I believe it's between he and the young man, the quarterback from Alcorn State, whose name escapes me right at the moment. The quarterback for Offensive Player of the Year and Player of the Year. They've got Jordan Bentley, who had his 8th 100-yard rushing performance of the season, and he actually owns 8 Alabama A&M records: career rushing yards, single-season rushing yards, single-game rush yards, career touchdowns, single-season touchdowns, career points, and single-season points. That's Jordan Bentley, who had a great year, obviously should be and will be a first-team all-SWAC running back. And then they had 2 1,000-yard receivers, and Zabrian Moore, and I'm looking for the other young man's name.
While you look for that, Brian, Felix Harper is whom you're talking about, who replaced Laura Johnson earlier this year.
Right. Abdul Fattah Ibrahim is the other. That's the he and Zabrian Moore, 2 1,000-yard receivers. So, yeah, I mentioned, so I mean that obviously I think is your SWAC And be honest. I mean, I tell you, another guy who you got to watch out for is Grambling's Jeremy Hickbottom. I mean, Jeremy Hickbottom for Grambling has been everything for them. And if he ends up in a contest, obviously Grambling still has to play Southern. But if Grambling beats Southern and ends up in the championship game, going back to Alcorn or playing Alcorn State again, a game went to overtime, and Grambling won 19-16 a few weeks ago. The winner of that game, Harper versus Hickbottom, could very well walk away with the SWAC Player of the Year. Although I think a lot of people will still be voting for Akil Glass, but. So that's how the SWAC season, the regular season ended. Of course, the only game that's left is to decide is the Bayou Classic between Grambling and Southern. And so I bring this final question to you, AD. And how do you think we should be? How do you think we should be looking at?
Before you get out there, one other game out there, Bryan, Prairie View A&M and Alabama State, the Turkey Day Classic also.
Oh, when is that? That's
Thursday.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Good point. So the SWAC season is not quite over. How should we handle the discussion? How should we handicap or talk about the Black College National Championship debate? Obviously, Florida A&M lost. Bowie State lost. We understand there's flaws with Alcorn State, Grambling, and A&T. How do you think this discussion will wrap up? What kind of criteria should we be looking at over the next couple of weeks as we come to a final vote among Black college football?
Right now, it's, in my opinion, it's between Alcorn and FAMU as far as the national champion, who will be crowned the national champion. Alcorn, with the FAMU loss, Alcorn has an opportunity, one, possibly two opportunities to go out and prove why they are the best team in Black college football. Stop one will be the SWAC championship game. Alcorn has a dominating performance in the SWAC championship game, and then they dominate an A&T team who's had their number for the last 3 years. If Alcorn goes out and does that, dominates both these games, you're probably going to crown Alcorn as your Black college national champion, although I do have a personal problem with the SWAC schedule and how the SWAC teams think that Virginia Lynchburg is a Division I team.
Okay.
And a member of the SWAC. And a member of the SWAC. Go look at Virginia Lynchburg's schedule. Virginia Lynchburg play, I believe, and I'm going off the top of my head because I do not have the schedule in front of me. They played 5 SWAC teams on their schedule this year, Bryan. I mean, they were everybody's homecoming date this particular year.
Yeah.
So, why is a FCS team scheduling not a Division II team, not another FCS opponent, they're not even NAIA, Bryan. They're NCAA or NCCCA, the Christian conference or whatever you want to call them, Bryan. I mean, it's ridiculous, Bryan. I just don't understand why they while they're
scheduling them, or should okay? So you're saying your contention is that they should be penalized somewhat?
CIAA independent team.
Okay.
Yes, they are USCAA independent team, Brian. And I'm looking through my notes right here, and I'm about to pull up their schedule, Brian. Virginia Lynchburg.
Yeah. Well,
Savannah
I know
State, West Florida,
Yeah.
Southeastern, Mississippi Valley State, Prairie View A&M,
Okay.
Hampton, and Southern.
Right.
So
Just 3 SWAC schools?
Just 3 SWAC schools this year.
Yeah. Yeah, but Alcorn didn't play them.
No, but I'm just talking about the SWAC itself. The SWAC
okay.
The SWAC has not beaten anybody outside of black college football in it seems like 5 years. And
but honestly, AD, let's be real. Outside of we have to say what it is. Outside of look, this past year when South Carolina State beat Wofford, that was really the only team outside of A&T over the last couple of years that's beaten anybody outside of black college football. So it's that rare right now. I'm sad as it to say, it's that rare. It's just across the board problem, and so I know what you're trying to say, but let's be fair. I think be fair to the bigger picture of it's an everybody problem right now, and the only team that really has sort of shown up is A&T, and then hey, props to you, South Carolina State, for getting on board and getting a big win, which is all the reason why it's disappointing, but not surprising, that South Carolina State got screwed out of an at-large bid.
I'm sorry, repeat that, Brian. I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, no, I was just commenting on, just the fact that nobody other than North Carolina A&T, and now this past year South Carolina State had beaten anybody out of the FCS. So
no, they have it, but that's another show for another day and another article that you and I will.
So how do
either you or I will write.
So back to, I want to wrap the show up with this final discussion, because I know this is what we're going to be debating or talking about all week. And I put it out there. I put it out there on Twitter. I want to know from, Box to Road to Onedin to the Black College Sports page, the Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, to all the black media pollsters and voters. I'm curious to see how people navigate teams this week, because FAMU still has the best record of any FCS school in black college football, hands down. Still has the best record. They're actually the highest ranked in the FCS poll. In the Stats FCS poll, they'll probably be the highest ranked in the coaches poll. Various computer model rankings have a debate right now. We can go to computerratings.com. FAMU is the highest rated. But then if you go over and look at the Massey ratings, you've got A&T and Alcorn rated above FAMU. So there's I don't know. That's why I asked you. I said, how do you handicap, or what do you think people are going to be looking at over the next 2 weeks as we come towards the end of the season and say, who's going to be the Black College National Champions? Because I'll tell you why I asked. I don't want to go into the Celebration Bowl with ESPN, Jay Walker, trying to tell us that North Carolina A&T versus whomever it is going to be for the Black College National Championship.
Well, Brian, don't listen, don't watch, because that's exactly what Jay Walker will do on the Celebration Bowl broadcast. He has not been, no disrespect to Jay Walker, he has not been a FAMU supporter all season long. And it's ironic that the first and the only time that he ranked FAMU number one in his poll is the day that FAMU lost. So I'm pretty sure he's going to be throwing out.
I think he had him in there. I think he had him in there the week before. I think he had him in there for 2 straight weeks.
Okay. FAM lost the. I have to vote him number one because there's nobody else in the debate. The FAMU loss reopened the debate, reignited the debate. You know, on paper, other teams that are remaining, we have 3 teams remaining. You have A&T, you have 4 teams remaining. You have A&T, you have Alcorn, then you have Southern, and then you have Grambling. On paper, A&T is probably the best of those 4 teams that are still playing with a chance to appear in the Celebration Bowl and play for the Mystical. And we'll start putting the word Mystical in front of it now. Black College National Championship.
Sure.
So it's honestly A&T's to lose.
And then what we'll have to.
Now the question is, will people give it to FAMU because FAMU beat A&T, although they did not play in the Celebration Bowl?
Right.
Because FAMU will have the best record, but when the season is done, if A&T wins the Celebration Bowl, they will only have 2 losses, just as FAMU does, and have that 1 extra victory.
No, they'll have 3 losses.
Oh yeah, they will have 3 losses. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
they have 2 FCS.
Right.
They have 2 FCS.
They'll have 2 FCS losses, and FAMU had 1 FCS loss. Correct. Yeah. So, and in conference they lost twice, and FAMU lost once. So. I know what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I think the other thing we have to define for people is people will bring up Bowie State and bring them into discussion and say, well, why isn't Bowie State part of the discussion for Black College National Champion? And we will have to, those of us who have expanded upon the merits of a Division II team versus an FCS team, will have to sort of explain that to people as well, and that's so.
I would give my explanation on that, Brian.
You've done that before. You've given it. I mean,
Bowie blew it this weekend with the FAMU loss. Bowie had a chance to cement themselves as a consensus national champion if they would have won this past weekend. They would have been 12-0 compared to FAMU's now 9-2. So they would have had the opportunity to cement their claim as the Black College National Champion. One more victory, and you pretty much would have had to have given Bowie the consensus national championship had they won this past weekend and then next weekend in the second round, Brian. But Bowie's out the discussion now as far as I'm concerned. Point blank.
I don't disagree with you.
Bowie's out of it.
I still like I said, I still think there'll be a segment of the population that will ask that question, and
the only thing that Bowie has that no other team in Black College can say is they had double-digit victories on the season.
Yeah, and nobody else, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think anyone else can.
No one else can. No one else can get to double digits this year. Alcorn.
What is Alcorn's record? 8 and.
Alcorn can get to 10.
Yeah, that's it. But okay, so most wins this year, nobody can reach Bowie. Yeah, you're right. With 11 wins, and that's what people. Yeah. So I mean, all of these things are fascinating, and this is what is the magic of college football, because it's been debated on all levels for years. Obviously, we understand there's no
150 of them to be exact.
True. There's no Black College. There's no playoff for Black College teams. to decide. It's always been based on polls. And so I'm just curious because people will remember the last thing you did. And I'm curious this week to see how people rank FAMU with a loss. I'm curious to see how high or where does a team like Alcorn, Grambling move, and A&T, how they move in people's poll, because this is the week that will sort of – I can't see too many people flipping outside of this week, meaning whatever you believe today, you almost go in today with a thought that only one or two scenarios can happen for me to move a team. Like, for example, I'll say our under D1 poll. Short of Miles getting to the regional finals, there wasn't any scenarios that we saw Miles jumping Bowie. There really weren't any scenarios for Savannah State to jump Miles from 3-2, because Savannah State's season's over. Miles won the championship. They're in the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? FAMU, best record in the MEAC, best FCS record, but their last thing you remember is a loss, even though they had 9 wins in between an opening season loss and an ending season loss. They had 9 straight wins. And they beat the best teams probably. I mean, of course, they didn't play Alcorn, but they beat Southern. They beat South Carolina State. They beat let me take that back. They beat A&T, and they beat South Carolina State. So, but you are what you people last remember. And so, like I said, I'm just.
So with that being said, Bryan, how will you submit your votes for your under D1 and then your D1 polls for this week?
You know what? Well, there are no changes to my Division II poll. Our Division II poll hadn't changed the last 2 weeks, and I don't think they'll change again. I think those are locked.
That would be Bowie 1, Miles 2, Savannah 3, correct. And then the 2 Virginia schools, I believe, is what it was. State followed by Virginia.
Actually, it was Langston 4, then Virginia State 5. So the question is, would you end the season saying Virginia State had a better season than Langston, who was co-conference champions?
Versus
Langston did have a – yeah, exactly. Langston finished 8-2. Virginia State finished 8-2. How do you value? What do you value more? Division II versus NAIA, and we've always kind of felt like they were similar leagues. So I don't have any vote. In terms of the FCS AD, I'm sleeping on it one more day before I submit my votes. So because I keep going back to telling you, the best team since October is Grambling. I can't get that out of my mind. The best, but I can't rank them number 1. Not right now at this point of the season. They still have to do 2 things for me, which is 1, beat Southern, and then they need to beat A&T.
They would have to do 3 things for me, Bryan. They would have not only get those 2, but they would have to win the bowl in order for me to put them at number 1, Celebration Bowl, in order for me to put them at number 1 for the season. Even consider.
Yeah. Oh, 3. I'm sorry. Yeah, that 3. I forgot. They have 3 potential games. Yeah. So Grambling's story is still untold because they still have to beat the Bayou. They have to win the Bayou. They got to get to the Celebration Bowl and win the SWAC, and then they have to, of course, win the Celebration Bowl. Now, that's the team that call me, and I will tell you right now, on air, on wax. If Grambling does all 3 of those things, I'm voting Grambling number 1. Because, again, I'm going to tell you, go look at since October, they would have run, at that point, they'd run 8 or 9 games in a row. And I told you, if you go look at those three of those first 4 losses, they weren't like blowouts. They were within a touchdown. So, That's all I'm gonna say. That Alcorn, I don't know yet. I don't know how I feel about Alcorn. I need to see the rest of the story told. Even though they've got more losses, they got twice as many losses. For some reason, it feels different, because Alcorn stumbled to Grambling. So potentially, if Grambling and Alcorn play again, that may say a lot right there. What about you?
I totally agree with you, Brian. Totally.
Okay. All right. Let's wrap up the show with a final note and a final thought. I know you had one final thing to share, and then I had one final note as well, and then we will close the show out. So I'll turn it over to you, AD. What's your final thought?
All right, Brian, and this is a non-football, but it is a football story that I need to that I get off my chest, Brian. We are dangerously close to another one of our HBCUs closing, Brian. And this time it is Selma University in Selma, Alabama. And this article that I am reading from is from APR.net, which is Alabama Public Radio.net. And my internet slowed down on me for a second, Brian. But I basically, because it's only one paragraph, so I basically go through the article. Another small historically black college is in financial trouble in West Alabama. The Selma Times-Journal reports that Selma University is hosting an event Saturday, and this is from October 30th that I'm reading this, to raise money that is needed to pay off more than $785,000 debt to the federal government. The school is trying to raise $2 million total. Any proceeds will also go to improve campus, restore the school's athletic program, and establish an endowment fund. President Alvin Cleveland says the private school wasn't recertified for a federal student financial assistance program because of inadequate paperwork and incomplete files, so it's being required to pay back financial aid. Selma University is affiliated with the Alabama State Missionary Baptist Convention. Another small church-affiliated school in Selma, Concordia College, closed last year amid declining enrollment and financial problems. And Brian, if this university closes, that will be the fourth HBCU this decade to close their doors, Brian. Earlier this decade, you had Bennett College, which closed their doors, and I'm trying to get the date on when Bennett closed their doors, Brian. But Bennett closed their doors. Concordia Selma, which was the only HBCU Lutheran school, closed their doors in 2018. And St. Paul College, I believe, is the other one, which is in Lawrenceville, Virginia, closed in 2013, Brian. So we're at 101 HBCUs. We're possibly getting ready to drop down to an even century, Brian, an even 100 HBCUs, Brian. Just a sad state of what's happening to our institutions. We know SACs or whatever accrediting agency comes in, they like to, they're going to decertify the school first because of financial aid problems, and then once the school loses the ability to give out financial aid, the death sentence is there. Within a year, the doors are closed, Brian. So, I mean, it's sad, Brian. nothing else we said. And if there's somebody who's listening to this podcast, if you're a major corporation, please give to this school in Selma, Alabama. If you don't feel comfortable giving to that school, give to somebody's HBCU, because black education is important. Education is important, period. Those who cannot get educated at PWIs or need that extra help, that's what the mission of these HBCUs are. Bryan, you enjoyed your HBCU experience. I enjoyed my HBCU experience. I enjoyed it so much I did it twice, Bryan. And, obviously that's what we met during our HBCU's experiences, and I wouldn't trade that experience for nothing in the world. But just a sad state that another one of our schools is facing financial issues, and there was another school, Stillman College, and I believe it was 2015, had to cut a lot of their athletic programs. They cut down pretty much to basketball and softball, baseball, I think, so that they could remain financially viable, and Stillman in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So it's an ongoing problem, Bryan. Fundraising is not where it needs to be with these colleges. Alumni donations are not where they need to be, which leads to other issues, which leads to understaffing. The understaffing leads to inadequate paperwork and incomplete paperwork. Once that happens, then the government comes in, and with an audit, when they find something, they're going to keep digging and keep digging and keep digging until they get enough on you to shut you down. So your thoughts on that, Bryan?
What was the name of the school again? Give the name of the school again.
Selma University, Selma, Alabama.
So Selma University. Well, I don't have much other than what you've already stated. You hate to see another potential school, HBCU, close. Hopefully, people can find a way to do some digging into Selma University, SELMA University in Selma, Alabama. Find a way to donate to the school if you can. I'll say a prayer that they're able to keep their doors open, and that more importantly, just continue to pray that all of our schools are operating with fiscal responsibility, and that they have the right organizational management leaders in place. That's really all you can hope for, and hopefully those people will serve in the best interest of the school.
Yeah, and it's not only that we know our facilities aren't the best, especially when you consider our private schools, private HBCUs, which more than half of them are private HBCUs. But the government is not doing what it needs to do. Also, we're not getting our government funding. Betsy DeVal is the Secretary of Education, is doing her best to not give the federal funding that these schools deserve. Hey, everybody has a congressperson in their area, state senators, state congressperson, federal. You have your people, your U.S. representative, your U.S. senators. You need to call them, write them, email them, make sure that they're giving the funding that they need and can appropriate to these schools. And as reallocations come up, the budget comes up on the state level and or on the federal level, that we are putting pressure on these people to make sure that these institutions of higher learning and fine higher learning stay open and get the proper funding so that they can do and prepare our young African American males and females for the future, and not just African Americans, but anybody who wants to go to an HBCU and to learn. And one last thing, Bryan, we have got to start thinking outside the box. Our HBCUs have got to start thinking outside of the box, because what we've been doing for 100, 140, 150 years does not work as effective as it did 100 years ago. So we've got to be new. We've got to be innovative. And when I say we, our HBCUs, our HBCU presidents, board of trustees, or whatever they call, have got to really start thinking outside the box and come up with creative ways to get the funds that they need, to do the research that they need, and to do the other things that they need to keep these institutions of higher learning open. I'm done.
All right. Thank you, AD. I'm going to finish with a football note here. Tennessee State finished up their 2019 season with a 37-27 come-from-behind victory over Tennessee Tech this past weekend. The Tigers finished their regular season 3-9, but it's been a record-breaking year for one Mr. Chris Rowland, the senior wide receiver, finishes the 2019 season with the most all-purpose yards in FCS football, 2,110 all-purpose yards. Also, the number one player in receiving yards with 1,437. He also had 166 punt return yards, 375 kickoff return yards, and 132 rushing yards. Now, his average per game actually puts him at number 2. His average per game is 175.83. But take note, the player who finished number 1 in yards per game, that's an average, played 2 fewer games, and played 50 more plays than Chris. So Chris, in 152 plays with a total of 2,111 yards, most total yards. And then the other statistic that we were tracking throughout the course of the year, the receptions, he finished the year with 104 receptions in 12 games, an average of 8.7 receptions per game, 8 touchdowns. Unfortunately, he is number 2 behind one Jareth Stearns of Houston Baptist, who finished with 105 receptions. Of course, nobody equaled the receiving yards. And so I think and we have not come up with another HBCU receiver other than Jerry Rice and Jaquay Nunnally to have over 100 yards receiving in a single season. Now we have a third in Mr. Chris Rowland. If there's another one out there that we're forgetting, tweet us, let us know. At DRB365 is my personal Twitter feed, or at my BCSN, the number 1 is where you can hit us up. Let us know if there's another receiver that you can think of that has eclipsed the 100 reception mark. We definitely want to include this in our discussion, but Chris Rowland is definitely in the discussion, one of the top 5 easily on the Black College Football Player of the Year award list. He should be there. I know the Black College Football Hall of Fame invites these guys for that ceremony. Chris Rowland should be invited. We'll talk about that maybe one of our next couple of shows. We'll kind of do our top 5, our Black College Players of the Year list. But I just wanted to end the note saying congratulations to Chris Rowland. The season as a team may not have been great, but you did everything you could do to impact Tennessee State games this year and had an outstanding season. Well, all right, AD, that's going to do it for this show. Thank you for listening in. Thank you for joining us. Please, if you can find a way to help out Selma University, we encourage you to do that. Try to reach out and look for something and be a part of the solution. Encourage and tell a friend as well. And, of course, we want to encourage you to follow us on Twitter at MyBCSN. Number 1 is the Black College Sports Network. You can find AD Drew at BCSN Drew, DREW, and find me at DRB365. Look us up on Facebook, Black College Sports Network, BCSN Sports Wrap, and of course, www.mybcsn.net is our webpage. And that's going to do it for Week 13. We'll let the discussion and debating begin coming up this upcoming Thanksgiving week. Hopefully we have a show before Thanksgiving, but if we don't, we want to say thank you for sharing our show. If not, if you haven't already, share it with a couple of people. Thank you for downloading, listening, and being a part of this experience that we get to do. And have a happy and safe Thanksgiving. We will be back with another show, our Week 14 preview of the Bayou Classic, and hopefully the Turkey. They call it the Turkey Day Classic, don't they, AD?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we'll look to give some previews on that. Even start getting into a little basketball discussion. There have been some interesting developments in games over the past couple of weeks in the HBCU conferences, and we'll do all of that and more. So thank you. Just thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody. And for AD Drew, I'm Bryan Fulford. Peace out.
But you stay hard.